Today on NewsWatch, on high alert, why officials say terrorists could use the holiday weekend to stage a massive attack.
If the point comes where my career is asking me to do something that my denomination or my relationship to God prohibits, then I got to leave the military over that.
Plus, Faith Under Fire will explain why military chaplains are being challenged for their Christian beliefs. Habla Español, the number of Spanish speakers in the U.S. is on the rise. Just how many they are might surprise you. Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. U.S. officials are sounding a holiday terror alarm that's one of the most serious in years. Their concern, recent attacks overseas combined with stepped-up recruiting in the U.S. and a call to arms during Ramadan. Heather Sells has this story.
In the last week, terrorists have struck and killed innocent vacationers in Tunisia, leaving 39 dead. In Kuwait, a suicide bomber attacked a Shiite mosque, killing 27 and injuring hundreds. ISIS has claimed responsibility for both. And today, a suicide bomber attacked troops serving with NATO in Afghanistan. This weekend, the FBI and Department of Homeland Security sent an alert to 18,000 law enforcement agencies. It warned of possible ISIS-inspired attacks in the U.S. over the 4th of July holiday weekend.
There was great concern. I would say there's probably more concern now than at any time since September 11th.
Another cause for concern, a new social media campaign by ISIS. It's currently blasting at least 90,000 messages a day worldwide, urging mass murder. It's just the latest in an ongoing campaign to recruit young people in the U.S.
ISIL has spent about a year investing in trying to reach troubled minds in the United States through social media, to either recruit them to come to their so-called caliphate to fight or to kill where they stand.
There's been about 50 people in the last 12 months who've been arrested in the United States for being radicalized by ISIS, wanting to go fight there or wanting to conduct an attack here. So there's a lot of people out there who are seeing themselves as aligned with ISIS.
Law enforcement is urging the public to be cautious and vigilant, but not asking people to hold back on holiday plans.
I think, on the contrary, people need to get out and enjoy the 4th of July.
And publicly, at least, the White House is downplaying the threat.
There is no specific, credible intelligence to indicate any threats against celebrations over the 4th of July weekend.
The FBI, however, is conducting an aggressive campaign targeting suspected radicals. It's made 7 arrests in the last 2 weeks, including a Queens college student who authorities say was conducting surveillance on the George Washington Bridge. Heather Sells, CBN News.
The Supreme Court has rejected a move by the Obama administration to limit power plant emissions. The Environmental Protection Agency has been forcing power plants to block mercury and other possible air pollutants. But the court ruled the EPA went too far, saying it failed to consider the high cost of the regulations. Justice Antonin Scalia wrote that it is wrong to impose billions of dollars of economic cost for a few dollars in health or environmental benefits. The case now goes back to lower courts for the EPA to decide how to account for the high costs. The High Court is also refusing to allow Texas to enforce new abortion clinic restrictions. The changes would have forced 10 abortion clinics to close. In a 5-4 vote, justices granted an emergency appeal from the clinics. This comes after a federal appeals court had upheld the rules. The Supreme Court's hold on the regulations will remain in effect until it decides if it will hear the clinic's appeal. California lawmakers have passed a bill creating the strictest vaccination requirements in the country. It forces parents to vaccinate their children or remove them from schools and homeschool them. Exemptions may be granted for some children with serious medical issues. The move comes in reaction to a recent measles outbreak at Disneyland. But many parents oppose the bill, saying it takes away their right to make their own choices for their kids and could put some children at risk, like Alexis Gastos' son, who has an autoimmune condition.
It runs contrary to what I think America is based on. I think this nation was founded on freedom, on the freedom to choose based on reason.
The majority of the people do not want this bill. They do not want to be mandated a medical procedure onto their children.
Opponents of the bill are vowing to sue to overturn it if the governor does sign it into law. Donald Trump is threatening to sue NBC after it announced it will take his Miss USA and Miss Universe pageants off the air. That's because he blasted immigrants from Mexico in his presidential campaign kickoff speech, saying they bring crime and drugs into America and that some were rapists. Mexico media giant Televisa also says it will no longer broadcast the Miss Universe pageant. And last week, Univision also announced it was canceling coverage of the pageants. The U.S. now has more Spanish speakers than the language's motherland, which is Spain. That makes the U.S. the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world, second only to Mexico. A new study published by the Cervantes Institute says there are 41 million native Spanish speakers in the U.S., plus another nearly 12 million who are bilingual. A report by the U.S. Census Bureau estimates the U.S. will have 138 million Spanish speakers by 2050. That would make it the biggest Spanish-speaking nation in the world. Israel prides itself on protecting minorities within the Jewish state. Still, some Christian sites have been attacked by fringe groups over the past few years. As Chris Mitchell reports, that has prompted officials to take new actions to protect the Christian community.
This meeting is the fourth in a series that's brought together a number of government ministries and leaders from the Christian community. Moti Zaken from the Ministry of Internal Security organized the meetings.
We think it's very important that we will be cooperating to solve problems, to improve the relations, because we value the Christian groups and representatives as a very important asset to the Jewish state.
David Pelegi serves as rector at Christ Church, the oldest Protestant church in the Middle East.
Our relationship with the State of Israel as the Christian community is good, but it can be better. And what we appreciate about this meeting is that we can raise practical concerns and hear reports from different government ministries, the police, the army, and find out what they're doing to improve the situation for the Christian minority here.
The government also wants to improve service to Christian pilgrims from around the world.
It is one of the major, I would say, issue for the Ministry of Tourism to get to know how to approach the Christian world, both outside the country and, of course, inside Israel.
According to the Ministry of Interior, that includes visas for Christians.
We want to give a good answer to the Christian population, also to the Christian foundations in Israel, and this is also important to the State of Israel. And I'm doing my job to give every service with all my heart, whatever we can do to make things easier for the Christian population in Israel.
With Christians under severe persecution throughout the region, Israel remains an island of refuge.
It's the only country in the Middle East, the whole Middle East, that actually has a growing Christian population. So that says a lot, because all the other countries around this region, the Christians are fleeing as fast as they can because of the persecution, Islamic persecution. So we can be happy that the Christians are well represented and they are an integral part of this country.
There's certainly no comparison between the Christian population here and what's happening all through the Middle East and in many places in Africa and China, and certainly even in the United States. I would say that in many regards, we might have more religious freedom here in Israel than folks would back in the United States.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
At least part of Greece's international bailout expires today, making this crunch time for the cash-strapped country. Banks remain closed, and there are long lines at ATM machines where Greeks are only allowed to withdraw $67 a day. The government is unlikely to repay a nearly $2 billion debt it owes to the International Monetary Fund today. And that's increasing fears the country is heading to a default and possible exit from the euro currency. Here in the U.S., a new Labor Department proposal could make 5 million more people eligible to receive overtime pay. Officials say the move would more than double the level at which full-time salaried workers must be paid overtime if they work more than 40 hours a week. Right now, any salaried employee who's paid more than $455 a week can be called a manager, given limited supervisory duties, and made ineligible for overtime. That proposed new rule would reset the salary threshold at about $970 a week.
Each of you is a testament to the healing power of sport.
Cheers, Chile. Coming up, we're going to show you how sports are helping some of our nation's heroes. They are American national treasures, our military wounded warriors. Injuries have taken more than 1 million out of the fight since the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But as John Jessup reports, many are overcoming through the healing power of sports.
With fanfare and fire, this looks like the Olympic Games, but these aren't your typical athletes. Since he was 10, Marcus Chile dreamed of being a Marine.
I was the kid in high school that was watching the invasion of Iraq on TV, and I remember looking over to my mom, and I remember telling her, like, this is what I'm going to be doing.
His dream turned into a nightmare when an IED took his left leg, leaving shrapnel all over his body. During his 2-year recovery, he thought only of returning to the battlefield.
I felt like that I had to continue to do my job and to focus on taking care of the guys that were to the left and to the right of me.
But his wounds were too severe.
And now the players for the U.S. Marine Corps, Marcus Chile.
Nearly 5 years later, Chile leads his fellow Marines in a different fight.
Each of you is a testament to the healing power of sport.
After months of training, sweat, and perseverance, teams from the Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard took over Quantico Marine Base to compete in the 2015 Warrior Games, surrounded by the love of family and honored by a grateful nation.
The sacrifice of wartime service is very real and very graphic, and yet what we're celebrating today is people who sacrificed a lot.
They're called warrior athletes, some whose scars are obvious, others harder to see, each adapting to a new way of life, pushing themselves and relearning what it means to get back up after a fall.
They are life-changing injuries, but you've got to adjust, overcome, and manage as best as you can. And from there, look at the positives and try and achieve through the inspiration of others, and at the same time inspiring others with it.
For the more than 200 athletes participating in this year's events, it's a chance for them to get back in the game on a level playing field. But many have also found that these games transcend athletic competition.
We are very competitive, but in the same sense, we're cheering each other on. We're cheering for other branches, we're telling each other congratulations, good throw, and being able to know that we're still brothers and sisters in the end.
These warrior athletes are bound by the sacrifice they gave in fulfilling their oath to serve and protect, and discovering they're still part of the team.
And I think once we get them back into the fight and they become part of the team, they become part of something greater than themselves, because that's what they came in to do.
It gets a little bit more meaningful for us when we're here together. We're all suffering in the heat, we're all suffering, and the coaches, are pushing us and having us, earn more capabilities for ourselves, that we're doing it together.
Inspiring others not only as warrior athletes, but as American heroes. John Jessup, CBN News, Quantico, Virginia.
Up next, they do something no one else can do, offering hope and healing to American service members. Now, atheists are on a mission to muzzle our military chaplains. Don't ask, don't tell once referred to gays in the military, but now it could apply to Christians in uniform. And military chaplains are also facing the fact that at times biblical values are even being called hate speech. Chuck Holton brings us the story.
Chaplains have been an integral part of the military throughout our nation's history, bringing hope to the living and comfort to the dying. Now some chaplains are coming under fire from official government policy and must choose between their conscience and their commander's orders. The repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell worries chaplains who follow the biblical view of same-sex relationships. Congress stepped in, passing a bill that guaranteed the rights of all military personnel to exercise their faith.
I put in an amendment to the 2014 National Defense Authorization Act that simply expands in law, in statute,
to be in compliance with the Constitution itself.
They can, in fact, bring their faith to the table in their work.
Ron Cruz spent 21 years as an Army chaplain and now heads the Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty.
Chaplains, and not only chaplains, but all service members, cannot receive recrimination for living out their faith.
Despite the law, many Christians and especially chaplains often find themselves at odds with military leadership. Some of the more egregious examples: 2 Baptist chaplains forced out of the VA chaplain program for quoting scripture and praying in Jesus' name. A chaplain candidate and former Green Beret was asked to represent a faith other than his own because, quote, there are too many Baptist chaplains, unquote. A soldier in Afghanistan accused of engaging in hate speech because he had a Bible in his desk at work.
I got an email from a chaplain in Afghanistan who preached a sermon for his unit talking about the last days and the fact that there would be a rise in homosexuality. He got called into his battalion commander's office and was told, you cannot preach from that text.
Another example of this tension happened here recently at Fort Benning, Georgia, home of the Airborne and Ranger Training Brigade. A chaplain was asked to give a suicide prevention class, but what happened next exploded in controversy. Captain Joe Lawhorn serves as chaplain for the 5th Ranger Training Battalion based at Fort Benning.
He wears the credentials. He's a pathfinder. He's a master blaster parachutist. He is a chaplain who really knows what it means to be a soldier.
Chaplain Lawhorn was asked to lead a suicide prevention class at the Mountain Ranger Camp. In addition to covering the Army-wide curriculum, he cited his own experience and shared his personal struggle with depression.
Joe, as a good chaplain, identified with him and said, I want you to know I've been there where you are. So I want to tell you how I have dealt with some issues of depression. And so he gave his Rangers a handout.
One Ranger took a picture with his phone and sent it to the Military Association of Free Thinkers and Atheists, who posted it on their website.
During the presentation, according to those who were witnesses who provided statements later, said at no time did Chaplain Lawhorn say, mine is the only way, mine is the best way.
Not long afterward, his brigade commander censured Chaplain Lawhorn for giving the handout. In our investigation, the military's been unable to cite any written rule or regulation the chaplain actually violated. Meanwhile, the Ranger who complained received no punishment, although he violated Army policy by going outside his chain of command. Those actions speak volumes about how toxic the climate has become for Christians in the military.
You're in a very pluralistic environment, so you get all faiths and all walks of life.
Former Army Ranger Jeff Struker became a chaplain halfway through his 24-year military career. He's been involved in every major American conflict since 1987.
George Washington, when he formed the Continental Army, formed 2 branches, infantry and chaplains, and basically said, I need warfighters, and then I need men who can minister to the soul of warfighters. Any chaplain who is doing their job well is a force multiplier for a unit. That force multiplier term means that the unit is more effective in combat. Doesn't matter if it's a transportation unit, a hospital unit, or if it's an infantry unit. They're more effective in combat with a chaplain than without a chaplain.
Struker says the vital role of chaplains goes beyond leading church services for the troops.
You need somebody in the unit who can deal with the spiritual issues of a soldier. No one else in the unit can do what a chaplain could do. 99% of the counseling that I did was people who weren't Christian. They came to me because I was there while the bullets were flying, and they needed somebody to talk to.
And that's not all the chaplain does.
I would say that there are 10,000 cases in Iraq and Afghanistan, this is not an exaggeration, where atrocities could have happened, but they didn't, because the chaplain was there to be a moral influence on the men and women that were on those battlefields.
Struker says the current climate would make it more difficult to do his job.
If the point comes where my career is asking me to do something that my denomination or my relationship to God prohibits, then I got to leave the military over that.
You serve everybody with grace and dignity. However, when someone comes to you for counsel, you've got to be absolutely clear up front. If you're coming to me, I counsel from a biblical perspective.
I don't want to see good chaplains leave the military. I hope that many more good men and women will become chaplains. But if you can't do it in good conscience, you owe it to God to leave the military.
From Fort Benning, Georgia, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Superbook's Gizmo made a special appearance at the Alegría Fest last month in Mexico. More than 5,000 people attended the event. They got to play, dance, and take photos with Gizmo. Children and adults had the opportunity to watch Superbook's episode about David and Goliath called A Giant Adventure. Superbook is on 14 TV channels in Mexico with a viewing audience of more than 3 million people. You can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international. Well, finally this hour, a message we like to call your Tuesday Tweetable, and we hope that it inspires you and encourages you to share this very simple note with others. There is so much unfolding in the world today, but remember, no matter how dark the day, God is in control. That said, we still don't always understand what's going on, but we must always know the Word of God is true, and He promises never to leave us or forsake us, and He is indeed in control. That's going to do it now for CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We love to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do it on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make this a terrific Tuesday, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.